It was an idea that first came to me on African soil. During a trip to Namibia and Tanzania, I was lucky enough to see some of the stunning wildlife that calls this continent home. But what really struck me was the incredible impact local people were having on the environment around them. Thanks to their ingenuity and creativity, biodiversity was returning, animals were being protected, and jobs were being created.
The British monarchy has been rocked by one of the most scandalous betrayals in its history. Queen Camilla, who had been by King Charles's side through thick and thin, is now banned from the palace after an affair with a man close to the royal household was uncovered. The affair, which had been carefully hidden from the public eye, was revealed when Prince William, in a shocking twist, uncovered the truth.
5 Nobel laureates and 525 years of academic excellence. Your future, I know, will be greater still. And as your very proud Chancellor, I will be cheering you on every step of the way. Thank you.
What followed was a series of events that led to Camilla's swift downfall, as her actions threatened not just her marriage, but the very future of the royal family itself. Now, as the palace braces for the fallout, one thing is clear: Camilla's reign as Queen Consort has come to an abrupt and devastating end. Inside the folder, King Charles found a series of high-quality photographs, each dated between May 11th and 13th, 2025. The images had been taken at a private estate near Windsor, an area that was familiar to the royal family. What was striking about these photographs was not just the quality of the images, but the people in them. In one of the pictures, Queen Camilla, his wife, was seen in an intimate setting with Edward Langley, a longtime member of the royal household. Edward, known for his dedication and loyalty to the family, had been trusted for years. Yet, what the photographs suggested was something far from professional. It was clear from the images that there was more to their relationship than what anyone had previously assumed. The photographs showed Camilla and Edward embracing in a private room, sharing a bottle of wine, and engaging in what appeared to be a private, secretive affair. For Charles, this was not just a personal betrayal. He had believed that Camilla had been away on a wellness retreat, a time meant for her to seek peace and clarity. But these pictures suggested otherwise. It wasn't just a simple matter of finding the queen in the company of another man. It was the undeniable evidence of infidelity that threatened to unravel everything. The discovery was more than just a matter of personal heartbreak. This was Buckingham Palace, a place steeped in centuries of history, and the royal family was not immune to scandal. But the nature of this betrayal was unlike anything they had encountered before. What Charles had discovered wasn't simply the product of gossip magazines or intrusive photographers. It was something that came from within. It was the palace's own security team that had gathered the evidence. What made the situation even more complex was the fact that the photographs were not the result of an accidental leak. The images had been verified by the palace's security team, a group that rarely spoke about their operations. Yet, they had confirmed everything. The pictures were legitimate, and Edward's presence at the estate had been corroborated by his travel records. The evidence was undeniable, and it painted a clear picture. Queen Camilla had betrayed not just her husband, but the very institution she had sworn to support. The photographs only scratched the surface. As the investigation into Camilla's actions began, more troubling findings came to light. The security team had also uncovered something unusual. Camilla's movements were being tracked, not by the media, but by the palace itself. On April 22, 2025, she accessed the Royal Heirloom Vault, an activity that was common among the royal family for heritage research. But on that particular day, there was an anomaly. A locked trunk had disappeared from the palace, and it was never seen again. The trunk had been taken by Camilla without proper documentation or clearance, and its absence raised immediate red flags. Charles ordered a thorough investigation into the missing trunk, which only deepened the mystery. Surveillance footage showed a suspicious pattern of activity. A vehicle belonging to Camilla had been seen parked outside the suite near Windsor for almost an hour on April 23rd. During this time, the trunk was removed from the suite, but it was never brought back. No staff were allowed to enter the suite during the visit, and no questions were asked. The disappearance of the trunk, along with the suspicious movements, added fuel to the fire. But what really alarmed Charles was what the trunk contained. As the investigation progressed, the royal family security team uncovered that two priceless heirlooms, Diana's iconic caterpillar earrings and the Spencer choker, worth over $650,000, were missing from the vault. These items, once a symbol of Princess Diana's legacy, had disappeared without a trace. For Charles, these heirlooms were not just valuable, they were irreplaceable. They were the very essence of his mother's memory, and their theft signaled something far deeper than just a personal betrayal. It was a violation of the very history that the monarchy was built upon. The evidence continued to mount. Camera footage from Clarence's house showed that on the same day the heirlooms disappeared, Camilla's car had been parked near the loading area for over 45 minutes. No documentation was provided for the visit, and no explanation was given. The absence of any official records, combined with the suspicious timing, painted a troubling picture of what had transpired. At this point, Charles could no longer dismiss the idea that this was just a simple misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act, one that threatened the monarchy's very foundation. As the investigation continued, another piece of the puzzle was uncovered. Camilla's secure tablet, which had been discreetly kept in her private room, revealed a series of messages. These messages, though seemingly innocuous at first, carried a deeper significance. Her communications with Edward hinted at more than just a casual relationship. They suggested a longing for something more, a desire for freedom and possession. There was no intention to return the trunk or offer an explanation for the missing heirlooms. It became increasingly clear that Camilla's actions were not just a betrayal of her marriage, but a betrayal of the very trust that held the monarchy together. For Charles, this was the breaking point. The man who had spent years trying to rebuild his public image, trying to bring peace and unity to his family, was now faced with an impossible situation. He had evidence of his wife's infidelity, but it was not just about the affair. It was about the theft of royal treasures and the violation of the monarchy's most sacred traditions. What had once been a partnership based on love and trust had now devolved into a scandal that threatened to engulf everything. As the weight of the situation settled over Buckingham Palace, King Charles knew that the royal family would be faced with a monumental decision. The evidence of Queen Camilla's betrayal was irrefutable, and the actions that had unfolded within the palace had left the monarchy vulnerable. For years, the royal family had faced criticism, scandal, and public scrutiny. Yet this was something entirely different. It was not a mere rumor or unfounded gossip, but a series of concrete events that threatened to destroy the very fabric of the institution. For Charles, this was not just a personal crisis. This was a defining moment for the British monarchy, and he had to make decisions that would affect not just his family, but the institution itself. The days that followed were filled with tension, secrecy, and careful planning. The palace's security and communications teams worked tirelessly to ensure that nothing would leak to the press. While the public was unaware of the full scope of the situation, Charles and his closest advisors knew that the consequences would be far-reaching. The decision to act was not taken lightly. Charles had always been known for his calculated approach to matters of state, and this was no different. He had spent years building relationships and repairing the royal family's image, and now it seemed that everything was at risk. But as the evidence mounted, the need to protect the integrity of the monarchy became increasingly clear. The royal family could no longer afford to remain silent in the face of such blatant betrayal. It was time to act. On the morning of July 4th, 2025, the decision was made. The palace issued an official statement, though it was clear that the news would spread far beyond the palace walls. The statement was brief, cold, and factual. It made no reference to the personal nature of the situation, focusing instead on the administrative changes that were being implemented. It was a calculated move, designed to keep the palace's actions as discreet as possible, while still sending a clear message to those involved. Queen Camilla, despite still holding the title of Queen Consort, was stripped of all her royal duties. Her access to royal properties was immediately revoked, and she was informed that she would no longer be allowed to participate in any royal engagements or events. The palace's security protocols were adjusted, and her access to the royal vaults and archives was terminated. The once lavish lifestyle that Camilla had enjoyed as the Queen Consort was suddenly and irrevocably altered. She was, in effect, exiled from the royal family's official functions. Camilla's response to the news was not one of shock or defiance, but of resignation. She had known, deep down, that her actions had consequences. She had spent the last few days at Clarence House, the palace's official residence, trying to come to terms with the reality of what was happening. The decision to remove her from the royal fold was not one that had been made impulsively. It had been the result of months of carefully planned strategy, and Charles had not been swayed by emotional appeals or public pressure. In the days that followed, the royal family moved swiftly to implement the changes. The first of these was the revocation of Camilla's access to all official royal properties. She was no longer allowed to enter any of the royal residences, including Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, or any of the other royal estates. Security measures were put in place to ensure that her access to these properties was completely blocked. It was a stark move, one that signaled to the world that there was no going back from the breach of trust that had occurred. Queen Camilla was also informed that her communications team, which had once been dedicated to managing her public image, was being reassigned. This team had been a crucial part of her success as the Queen Consort, helping to shape her image as a graceful and dignified member of the royal family. But now, her public relations team was no longer needed. The palace's press office took control of the narrative, ensuring that the public would receive only the information that the monarchy deemed appropriate. The changes did not end there. The palace's internal systems were overhauled. The codes to the royal vaults were reset, and access was restricted to only the most trusted members of the royal family. Even Camilla's own security detail, which had once been provided by the crown, was withdrawn. The guards who had once been assigned to her were reassigned to other duties, further isolating her from the royal family. For Camilla, this was a moment of profound loss. She had been a part of the royal family for over 2 decades, having married Charles in 2005, after years of public scrutiny and criticism. Her position as Queen Consort had been hard-won, and her removal from the family's inner circle was a painful blow. She was no longer welcome in the spaces that had once been her home. The public nature of the decision, though discreet, was a clear message. The monarchy had no tolerance for betrayal, and no one, not even the Queen Consort, was above reproach. The announcement was not made with fanfare or spectacle. There were no grand speeches or public statements from the palace. Instead, it was done quietly, in a way that reflected the seriousness of the situation. King Charles knew that this was not a moment for drama or public outcry. It was a decision that needed to be handled with dignity and discretion. The palace's approach was methodical, focused on minimizing the damage to the royal family's image, while ensuring that the trust that had been broken could not be repaired. That evening, Camilla was informed that her belongings would be packed and moved out of Clarence House. The staff, once loyal to her, were quietly informed of the changes, and many of them were reassigned to new positions. Her personal possessions, including her wardrobe and personal items, were carefully packed by a small group of trusted palace staff. By the time the evening rolled around, Clarence House was eerily quiet. Camilla, who had once been a central figure in royal life, was now a woman without a home within the royal family. The public, however, would not be kept in the dark for long. News outlets, always on the lookout for the latest scandal, began to pick up on the story. Rumors began to swirl, and the palace's attempts to control the narrative became an uphill battle. Within days, the headlines were filled with speculation about Camilla's affair and the royal family's response. The public was divided. Some expressed sympathy for Charles, understanding the gravity of his situation, while others were critical of how the royal family had handled the matter. The breaking point came on July 6th, when a story was published that detailed not only the affair, but also the missing heirlooms from the royal vault. The public was stunned as new revelations came to light. Pictures of Camilla walking hand in hand with a man who was not her husband, coupled with the discovery of stolen jewels, ignited outrage. The story quickly spread, amplified by social media, where people voiced their anger and disappointment in Camilla's actions. The hashtags @NotMyQueen and #DianaDeserved better gained traction, resonating with many who felt that the monarchy had been disrespected by one of its own members. Amidst the chaos, King Charles remained calm. He understood that the scandal was far from over, but he knew that the decisions he had made would protect the monarchy's future. Camilla's exile was not just a punishment for her personal betrayal. It was a signal to the rest of the world that the royal family would not tolerate actions that jeopardized the institution's integrity. The monarchy, with all its history and traditions, would survive, but it would do so without Camilla at its side. As the royal family moved forward, the focus began to shift. Prince William, who had been largely silent during the entire ordeal, was quietly stepping into a more prominent role within the family. His calm demeanor and commitment to the monarchy had not gone unnoticed by the public. Catherine, too, emerged as a symbol of strength and stability in these turbulent times. The royal family, although shaken by the events, was now preparing for a future where they could rebuild and restore their legacy. The removal of Camilla from the royal fold was not the end of the story, but it marked a turning point. The monarchy was facing a crisis, but it was a crisis that would ultimately strengthen the institution. King Charles, though deeply affected by the personal betrayal, was determined to ensure that the monarchy would continue to thrive in the years to come. The road ahead was uncertain, but the decisions made during this turbulent time would shape the future of the British royal family for generations to come. The discovery of these truths left Charles in a state of quiet contemplation. He did not rush to act immediately, though the pain of what had been uncovered weighed heavily on him. Instead, he took his time, reviewing the reports and carefully considering the next steps. This was not just a matter of personal heartbreak. It was about the future of the monarchy. It was about trust, dignity, and the values that the royal family had upheld for centuries. Camilla's actions had caused irreparable damage, and Charles knew that something had to be done. The investigation into Camilla's actions had revealed more than just an affair. It had uncovered a pattern of deceit and betrayal, one that not only hurt Charles personally, but also endangered the legacy of the royal family. The heirlooms that had once symbolized the monarchy's history were now gone, and there was no way to retrieve them. The palace had been violated from within, and the damage was done. As Charles sat alone in his private study, contemplating the weight of what had happened, he knew that a confrontation was inevitable. But it would not be a public spectacle. It would not be a show for the media or the public. This would be a quiet, deliberate conversation, one that would have far-reaching consequences for the royal family. The trust that had been broken could never be repaired, and the monarchy's future depended on how Charles handled the situation. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time to act. As the days passed, the situation surrounding Queen Camilla's exile began to take a new direction. The public's reaction to the royal scandal was intense, but it was also deeply revealing about the monarchy's place in modern Britain. The combination of betrayal, scandal, and the subsequent response from the palace made it clear that the monarchy was at a crossroads. What had initially been a quiet and discreet decision to remove Camilla from the royal fold soon transformed into a high-stakes drama with implications far beyond the palace walls. Camilla's sudden removal had sparked a wave of public and media attention. What had begun as a whisper within the confines of Buckingham Palace had quickly become the talk of the town, with every tabloid and news outlet eager to cover the scandal. The public's thirst for details was insatiable, and the royal family, despite their efforts to maintain control, found themselves increasingly under the spotlight. As the media frenzy intensified, the focus shifted from the personal betrayal to the larger issues surrounding the royal family. Questions began to arise about the future of the monarchy and the role of the remaining members of the royal family. King Charles, whose reign had already been marked by controversy, now faced the challenge of not only protecting the royal family's reputation, but also ensuring its survival in an increasingly critical public eye. The pressure on the monarch was immense, and there was no clear roadmap for navigating the crisis that had unfolded. In the midst of this chaos, Prince William found himself thrust into a more prominent role. For years, he had been preparing for his eventual ascension to the throne, but this moment seemed to have arrived much sooner than anyone had expected. The young prince, who had once been known for his charisma and charm, was now being looked to for guidance and leadership in the wake of his stepmother's disgrace. His calm demeanor in public had been noted, but it was in the private halls of the palace that his true strength as a future king would be tested. The changes that were taking place within the royal family were not limited to public appearances and media strategies. Behind the scenes, King Charles had been carefully considering his options. He knew that the monarchy's future depended on how they responded to the crisis. He also understood that the decisions he made would have far-reaching consequences, not just for the family, but for the institution itself. The British monarchy, once a symbol of tradition and continuity, was now facing a pivotal moment in its long history. In the days following Camilla's removal, the palace began to focus on the delicate task of rebuilding its image. The media had already latched onto the scandal, and the more it spread, the harder it became to control the narrative. King Charles and his advisors understood that they needed to present a united front. The royal family could not afford to show weakness, and they had to demonstrate resilience in the face of the crisis. This was not just a personal matter for Camilla. It was a matter of national importance. The monarchy had to weather the storm and emerge stronger. One of the first steps in the rebuilding process was the way the royal family handled their public appearances. Prince William and Catherine, now seen as the future of the monarchy, became the new face of the royal family. They took on more responsibilities, making public appearances, attending charity events, and offering a sense of stability and continuity. Their presence, though understated, was a signal to the public that the monarchy could carry on despite the scandal that had shaken it to its core. The couple's handling of the situation spoke volumes. They were not drawn into the drama of the scandal, but instead focused on their duties and responsibilities. Catherine, who had long been admired for her grace and poise, emerged as a key figure in this new chapter of the monarchy's history. She took on more of the public-facing responsibilities, often seen attending events that showcased her commitment to causes that mattered to her. The public's adoration for Catherine grew, as she demonstrated that her role was not just that of a supportive spouse, but that of a woman capable of leading with quiet strength. For Prince William, this period marked a shift in his royal responsibilities. He was no longer just the prince, the future king. He was now a symbol of the monarchy's resilience. The public's perception of him changed as he took on more prominent duties and demonstrated a level of maturity beyond his years. His role as a father, a husband, and a future monarch became intertwined, and his actions in the wake of the crisis set the tone for the future of the monarchy. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also understood that the monarchy's survival depended on how he and his family navigated this tumultuous period. While the focus shifted to Prince William and Catherine, it was clear that the damage done by Camilla's actions was not easily forgotten. The public was unforgiving, and their anger was palpable. The hashtags and viral videos continued to circulate, with people expressing their discontent at the betrayal of Princess Diana's memory. The missing heirlooms from the royal vault, particularly the famous 1986 Qatar diamond earrings, became a symbol of the scandal. The revelation that Camilla had been involved in their unauthorized removal from the vault only added fuel to the fire. As the media continued to report on the scandal, the public's focus began to shift toward the broader implications of the thefts. It was not just the betrayal of Princess Diana's memory that angered the public, but the sense that the royal family had been compromised. These heirlooms were not just valuable, they were part of the monarchy's history, and their removal felt like a direct assault on that legacy. The damage to the royal brand was significant, and while the palace worked diligently to control the narrative, it was clear that the public was not going to forgive so easily. The timing of these revelations also played a critical role. The palace had hoped that the scandal would remain contained, that it would be a matter of personal betrayal rather than one that threatened the monarchy's credibility. But the press had picked up on the story, and with the power of social media behind them, the story became a global sensation. The more the public learned, the harder it became for the royal family to maintain their carefully crafted image. The situation was evolving, and the royals were not in control of the outcome. Behind closed doors, King Charles and his advisors were working tirelessly to secure the future of the monarchy. They knew that the public had already formed their opinions, and no amount of damage control would change that. The royal family's next moves would be crucial in determining how they would be remembered in history. King Charles was faced with difficult choices, but he knew that the monarchy could survive only if it adapted to the changing times. He understood that the role of the royal family had shifted, and that the expectations of the public had evolved. It was in this context that King Charles began to consider the long-term future of the monarchy. The scandal had exposed vulnerabilities that had long been hidden beneath the surface. The British public, once firmly supportive of the royal family, was now questioning their role in society. It was clear that the monarchy could no longer rely solely on tradition and ceremonial duties to maintain its relevance. The royal family needed to demonstrate that it could evolve and adapt to the modern world, and that it could maintain its place in British society, despite the controversies that had threatened to engulf it. In the coming weeks, the palace would focus on rebuilding the public's trust. Prince William and Catherine would take the lead, showing the world that the monarchy could continue in a new, more modern form. The public, who had once been captivated by scandal, now looked to the future. They wanted to see how the royal family would respond, not just in the face of betrayal, but in the face of a changing world. As the days turned into weeks, the royal family moved forward with a quiet determination. They knew that their survival depended on their ability to adapt, to move beyond the scandal, and to restore the public's faith. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the monarchy would never be the same again. The lessons of the past would guide them, and the future of the royal family was in the hands of those who could navigate the challenges ahead with grace, dignity, and a renewed sense of purpose. The scandal surrounding Queen Camilla and her abrupt removal from the royal family had far-reaching effects, both within the palace and in the public eye. In the months following her departure, the British monarchy found itself grappling with the fallout of a crisis that had shaken its very foundation. Despite the efforts to keep matters within the palace walls, the public's reaction was unyielding, and the ripple effects were felt across the globe. The royal family, once seen as a symbol of unity and tradition, now faced the challenge of rebuilding their image and reaffirming their relevance in an ever-changing world. As Queen Camilla's name was erased from official palace documents, her absence became palpable. The media, which had once lavished praise upon her for her efforts in modernizing the monarchy, now turned their attention to her fall from grace. The headlines, once filled with admiration for her role alongside King Charles, were now dominated by the story of her betrayal. Her involvement in the theft of royal heirlooms and her extramarital affair had not only tarnished her reputation, but had cast a long shadow over the royal family. The once proud Queen Consort had been reduced to a symbol of scandal, and the monarchy had to find a way to move forward. Prince William and Catherine, who had already emerged as the new faces of the royal family, now found themselves in the spotlight more than ever. As the public's admiration for Camilla quickly turned to disdain, attention shifted to the future of the monarchy. With King Charles deeply affected by the crisis, Prince William assumed a more prominent role. His leadership was crucial in guiding the royal family through this difficult period. His steady demeanor and calm response to the situation earned him respect, but it was clear that the road ahead would not be easy. In the days following Camilla's removal, the royal family worked to restore public confidence. Prince William and Catherine made more public appearances, reinforcing their commitment to the values that the monarchy had long stood for. They attended charitable events, participated in community outreach, and remained focused on their responsibilities. Their actions spoke louder than words, and the public began to see them as the future of the monarchy. They represented a new era, one where tradition and modernity could coexist, and where the monarchy could adapt to the changing needs of the country. But the public's desire for change went beyond just a new generation of royals. Many Britons began to question the relevance of the monarchy itself. The scandal had exposed the vulnerabilities of the institution, and people were no longer willing to simply accept the royal family as an unquestioned symbol of national unity. The media played a significant role in shaping public opinion, and the constant coverage of the scandal had left many feeling disillusioned. The monarchy, once seen as a stabilizing force, was now being viewed with suspicion and skepticism. This shift in public perception did not go unnoticed within the palace. King Charles, who had always been a strong advocate for the monarchy's preservation, now found himself at a crossroads. The crisis had made it clear that the monarchy could no longer rely on tradition alone to maintain its place in British society. It needed to evolve, and King Charles knew that he had to be the one to guide it through this difficult period. The future of the monarchy depended on his ability to balance the old with the new, to preserve the institution's integrity, while also adapting to the changing demands of the public. As the months passed, King Charles became more focused on securing the future of the monarchy. His role as monarch was now inextricably linked to the actions of his family, and he knew that the public's perception of them would determine the monarchy's survival. His decision to distance himself from Camilla was a difficult one, but it was clear that it was necessary for the long-term health of the royal family. The betrayal had been too great, and the damage to the monarchy's reputation had been too significant to ignore. For Catherine and Prince William, the task of restoring the monarchy's image was not just about rebuilding trust, but about ensuring that the institution could continue to serve its purpose in the modern world. They understood that their roles were not merely ceremonial, but were critical to the future of the British monarchy. They represented a new kind of royal family, one that was grounded in tradition, but also open to change. They were not just the future heirs to the throne. They were the ones who would define what the monarchy would look like in the years to come. In the face of this challenge, the royal family became more focused on their duties and responsibilities than ever before. They worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that the public remained engaged and supportive. They understood that they needed to show the country that they were more than just a family of privilege. They had to prove that they were capable of making a positive difference in the lives of the British people. The public, however, remained divided. While many admired Prince William and Catherine for their grace and resilience, others remained skeptical about the monarchy's future. The scandal had exposed deep divisions within British society, and the royal family was no longer seen as a unifying force. The monarchy's long-standing role as a symbol of national pride and continuity had been called into question, and many felt that it was time for a new chapter to begin. Despite the challenges, the royal family pressed on. Prince William's leadership continued to grow, and Catherine's influence within the family became more pronounced. As the public looked to the future, they saw in the young royals a new kind of monarchy, one that was not bound by the mistakes of the past, but was instead focused on creating a positive legacy for the future. The monarchy, it seemed, was not only surviving, but evolving. the crisis surrounding Queen Camilla's fall from grace would go down in history as one of the most tumultuous periods for the British monarchy. But in the end, it was not the scandal itself that defined the future of the royal family. It was how they responded to it, how they handled the public's concerns, and how they moved forward in the wake of a crisis. The monarchy's survival would depend on its ability to adapt to the changing times, and Prince William and Catherine had shown that they were ready to lead that transformation. As the dust settled and the royal family began to rebuild, it became clear that the monarchy's future was in capable hands. Prince William and Catherine had proven that they were not just heirs to the throne, they were the new face of the monarchy. With their steady leadership and unwavering commitment to public service, they had shown the British people that the monarchy could still have a meaningful place in the country's future.